Public Safety Committee.
It's an honor to be here, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman and members, it's really important for us to be having this critical conversation right now. If the reports from the federal government are to be believed, Operation Metro Surge should be winding down soon. Tragically, as it winds down, whenever the real end to this situation does come to an end, it will come too late for Renee Good, for Alex Preddy, and all who love them. We will continue to seek justice for them. The surge will come too late for Liam Conejo Ramos and other children who have to live with the trauma of their detention. It'll come too late for everyone who was wrongfully and illegally detained. It'll come too late for Minnesotans who have endured racial profiling, for businesses that have closed, for children that couldn't go to school, for people who've fallen behind in their rent because they couldn't get safely to work. The unprecedented, unconstitutional, and unnecessary exercise of force that is Operation Metro Surge leaves a lot of pain in its wake. Despite this pain, when the surge ends, it will be a victory. It'll be a good day. It'll be a victory for the rule of law, and it'll be a victory for the power of creative, lawful First Amendment activity, and for the strength of unity over division. Minnesotans organize themselves. They exercise their legal rights to observe and protest by the tens of thousands in subzero temperatures. They help their neighbors who needed help. And in the face of massive display of force and acts of intimidation and violence, they held their and our constitutionally protected ground, bravely, creatively, peacefully. I promised during this surge that I would do all I could to match Minnesotans' bravery. My office and I did a lot to hold ICE, DHS, and the Trump administration accountable for the rule of law and the Constitution. On January 9th, just 2 days after the death of Renee Good, my office joined forces with the Hennepin County Attorney's Office to create a portal for witnesses to submit evidence. This was necessary because almost immediately after ICE agent Jonathan Ross shot and killed Renee Good, the federal government made the extraordinary announcement that it would not include the state in its investigation or share evidence with state investigators. Mr. Chairman, you have been knocking around the courts of this state for a long time, and you are very well aware that it is entirely normal and routine for state law enforcement officials to work with federal law enforcement officials, whether it's the FBI, ATF, DEA, you name it. We work together routinely. Task force are usually generally made up of both state and federal law enforcement officials. The decision to cut state investigators out was extraordinary. On January 12th, we had to file a lawsuit in federal court to end the surge. We argued and continue to argue that the surge is unconstitutional, violating our First, 10th Amendments to the Constitution and equal sovereignty principle. On January 15th, my office took the extraordinary step of having to launch a form on our website for Minnesotans to share the impact of federal government actions, including DHS actions, and the impact on them personally and people close to them, and to gather witness information because, again, we were not getting cooperation from that we were used to from our federal partners. To date, we have 1,500 submissions. And then on January 24th, the day Alex Preddy was killed, my office did something that it never had to do before. Representing the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, we filed a lawsuit along with Hennepin County to compel the federal government to preserve evidence, something that would be unthinkable. We won a temporary restraining order within 2 hours after we filed it. Disappointingly, the FBI announced that it would not cooperate with the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension in the Preddy matter either. Again, these investigators are not political. They are professional investigators, very used to working with federal authorities, and they have been told by their local federal attorney counterparts, it's not our call, but they won't let us. And that's sad. So allow me to make clear that although the surge is winding down, 2 lawsuits we filed during the surge continue. We will continue challenging the constitutionality of the surge so that this administration or any administration cannot ever again attempt to compel a state to kneel to its policy demands, and that we keep fighting for truth, accountability in the killings and the other illegal actions or questionably illegal actions. Minnesotans had a right to expect that their federal government would have a credible, rational basis for sending 3,000 federal agents to our state for the largest immigration enforcement action in our nation's history. The federal government has never deployed as many immigration agents to one place at one time as it did right here in our very state. Instead, every rationale the administration has offered has been a pretext. The government has said that the purpose of the surge was to fight unauthorized immigration, yet Minnesota ranks 28th among all states in the percentage of undocumented immigrants. Florida and Texas alone have nearly as many undocumented people as the entire population of the state of Minnesota. The federal government has said the purpose of the surge is to fight fraud in government programs. I'm actually fine with that. I abhor fraud. My office is already in this fight. We've convicted over 300 people of Medicaid fraud in the last 7 years. But the government did not surge forensic accountants, computer scientists, who could actually help us in this fight against fraud. Instead, they sent 3,000 masked armed men. In fact, the surge has harmed the fight against fraud in Minnesota. Because of it, the federal government's work in fighting fraud in Minnesota has ground to a halt. The surge has triggered a wave of experienced prosecutors resigning from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota, and the remaining staff are drowning under a flood of habeas corpus petitions connected to immigration issues. The government has also said the purpose of the surge was to fight violent crime and rid our streets of the worst of the worst. Yet violent crime in the rates in Minneapolis were falling before the surge. Furthermore, ICE's own data shows 67% of those it has detained in Minnesota have no criminal record, and only a very small percentage have a record of committing violent crime. Notoriously, some of those detained have been children. 5-year-old Liam Conejo Ramos, the worst of the worst. 10-year-old Elizabeth Zuniga Gaseguano, the worst of the worst. And also, I don't know what the current status numbers are up to this day, but for several days this year, the federal government committed 2 of the homicides that were out of the 4 that were committed in the city of Minneapolis. Half. So it's hard to say this is about the worst of the worst. The federal government has also said the purpose of the surge is to gain cooperation from state and local officials in immigration enforcement. Now, the fact is, this is a late justification that happened after Metro Surge began. But I want to be very clear. Under Minnesota law, we have complied fully with the requirements of the law. The Minnesota Department of Corrections is already following state law. Section 631.50 requires that it inquire into the nationality of everybody convicted of a felony, and that it be reported to immigration authorities. And that when a non-citizen is convicted of a felony near the release date, that information be transferred. That's happening right now, and even the federal authorities have to acknowledge that, have acknowledged that. The federal government had to back off their false claim to the contrary when the DOC presented them with the facts. Now, Minnesota sheriffs and county attorneys already comply with state law that they may not keep someone incarcerated on an immigration detainer longer than they are otherwise legally allowed to incarcerate them. In February 2025, I did issue a legal opinion that restated the law, which is supported by a noted Minnesota case called Esparza versus Nobles County, as well as other cases from other states, which clearly state that if after a person were duly released, they were then retained, that would be a rearrest and there has to be a legal justification for it, and which, if we were to do so, would subject counties to liability. When I met with Board Czar Tom Homan in person, he acknowledged that this was the law. So Minnesota is not, this surge isn't because we weren't following the law. We absolutely were. And so I can only come to one conclusion, Mr. Chairman, and after looking at all of the offered reasons and coming to the conclusion that they're not supported by the facts, I can only conclude that the surge is about what President Trump said it was about. In a Truth Social post on January 13th, he wrote, quote, "Retribution and reckoning," unquote, was coming to Minnesota. Operation Metro Surge was Trump's retribution for our policies, our values, and how we vote. So, Mr. Chair, I will stop right there, but I will say that I think that the bills that are under consideration have a lot of merit, and I support them. Duty to render aid is a solid, good piece of proposed legislation. The mass prohibition as well. I appreciated the dialogue that happened in the previous session, this previous moment. Protecting essential spaces, very important. Minnesota Constitutional Remedies Act, I support that. And the BCA Participation in Federal Investigations Act, I think all are meritorious pieces of legislation. And I would hope they would get bipartisan support, because at the end of the day, I'm urging conservative behavior here from our legislators. Let's conserve the Constitution. Let's conserve the Constitution. There's nothing wrong with conserving what is right to conserve. So with that, I'll stop.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General.